Hello, Andrew.
Hello.
Hi, thank you very much for being with us today. And yes, discussions for a better future. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Excellent. So
it's not as sunny in England as it is in Malta, I bet.
Yeah. Yes. So, for the benefit of the televiewers, Andrew Bridgen is a former four-term MP for North West Leicestershire. He exposed a number of scandals and cover-ups while an MP, including the Horizon Post Office miscarriage of justice, modern slavery in the fast fashion industry in Leicester, and the COVID-19 vaccine scandal. Although not longer an MP, he continues to campaign for the truth to be told about the COVID pandemic response and to stop the use of mRNA vaccine treatments in humans and animals. Andrew, why did you stand up for all of this?
Well, my degree at University at Nottingham many, many years ago just happened to be in biological sciences with biochemistry, specialising in virology, genetics and behaviour. So I think I was probably one of the most qualified of the 650 MPs to look at the pandemic response. My concerns had been raised early in the pandemic and had only intensified with the way that professionals asking legitimate questions, scientists and doctors, whether about the vaccines or the lockdowns, where they were completely cancelled, and that isn't the way that science works, it isn't the way that politics should ever work. And when my government were being petitioned by the Medicines and Healthcare Product Regulatory Agency in November 2022 to extend the vaccines, the experimental vaccines, to children down to 6 months of age in the UK, I had enough at that point. There was no healthy child had died of that age group from COVID-19. We already knew from the Fryman papers analysis of the original Pfizer and Moderna test papers, which they tried to hide for 75 years in America, but had been released by a Supreme Court judgment, that at least 1 in 800 of those small children down to babies would have had a severe adverse event, including possibly death or life-changing injury, for no benefit. And I knew I could persuade the House, or the government at least, not to approve those drugs. I'm not stupid. I knew there'd be a huge backlash from the establishment, so I went to colleagues and tried to get them to support me and agree with me. And many of them did agree with me privately, but not one of them was willing to stand up publicly. I even had an esteemed colleague I'd campaigned with before who told me that he'd had 2 Pfizer jabs, had gone to the gymnasium, had terrible chest pains, and had to go to hospital, and they told him he'd had 2 heart attacks. And despite that, he wouldn't speak out about the vaccines. So I stood up on my own on the 13th of December 2022, and my life changed from that moment. I was completely cancelled. Within a few months, I was thrown out of the Conservative Party I'd been a member of for decades. But the good news is, I stopped the government from extending the vaccines to those small children.
Having said this, like the majority of the people around the world, you trusted medicine and you took the vaccine, right?
I took 2 doses of AstraZeneca, and I have had side effects after that myself, yes.
How did it affect you?
At the age of 57, I suddenly had a cold in July, and I thought, what on earth is this? And I got hay fever. Never had hay fever in my life. My immune system was so stressed from the vaccines that I could no longer cope with things that my body could normally cope with. Then I came out in hives, which is like a nettle rash all over your body for 7 months. And I was popping antihistamines, which I've never taken before in my life, every 8 hours, else they just burst out again. Eventually I had some steroids to help try and get rid of that. And I developed food allergies, which again, that's my autoimmune system's been stressed. And there's lots of foods now my body can't cope with, which I was perfectly happy eating before I took the second shot of AstraZeneca. And those are very, as a biologist analysing my own symptoms, that's my immune system's been damaged. And I'm afraid that's what happens when you take these experimental vaccines. Obviously, there's high risks of of blood clots, heart attacks, strokes, but you are damaging your immune system, and I'm afraid the more shots you take, the more the damage is compounded.
Where do you stand today in lawfare?
In lawfare, well, I've taken legal action against Matt Hancock, who was the health secretary at the time of the vaccine rollout. That's 2.5 years in, and he's doing everything he can to delay and increase the cost to try and take my resources away so I can't pursue him. He desperately does not want to be in court answering questions under oath about the safety and efficacy of those experimental vaccines. I'm currently in about 3 legal cases, which is the way the establishment seek to attack you. That's what they do to people who go against the narrative. And I will share with you that before I was expelled from the Conservative Party in April 2023, I was told in no uncertain terms that the plan was to cover up the vaccine harms and excess deaths for at least 20 years. I've been offered bribes the previous January of anything I wanted. Just tell us what you want, and I refused those. And then I had the threats, and they said to me, if you carry on speaking out, you've got to bear in mind you're taking on the most powerful vested interests in the world, with all the personal risk for you which that will entail. And I went into politics, a very, very wealthy businessman. I was young executive of the UK when I was young in 2000. I had considerable personal wealth. I came out of politics penniless, which is pretty strange because most of my colleagues seem to do quite well out of it.
Unbelievable that when you think about it, that this is the price you need to pay for being a good politician, for doing a good job.
Andrew?
Well, I actually, once I'd spoken out, I was ostracised. I spent 20 months, the last 20 months I was in Parliament, eating all my meals on my own.
Wow.
And if you notice, if you go and look at the parliamentary television, what you'll find is that when I gave my speeches about excess deaths, I think I had the first one in the world. It took me 9 months of petitioning the mother of all parliaments to get a debate on excess deaths. And we were having 1,500, 2,000 excess deaths in the UK every week. When, after a pandemic, when you've had excess deaths, there should be a period when you have less than expected deaths, because obviously if the old and the vulnerable had passed earlier than they might have done, despite what James Bond will tell you, you can actually only die once, and if they passed earlier, they couldn't pass in 12 months' time. So, but we'd never had less than expected deaths. After the pandemic, our excess deaths carried on, and it took me 26 attempts. And it wasn't until I sent a documentary I'd made about thalidomide, the thalidomide scandal in the 60s, early 60s, which was withdrawn in 1961 because of the side effects of the thalidomide drug on unborn babies. What I discovered is that it was 1972 before the word thalidomide was allowed to be debated and questioned in my parliament. And a ruling of 3 Strasbourg judges against Kemi Grunethal, the manufacturer of thalidomide, they ruled that speakers at the House of Commons had deliberately suppressed all debate on thalidomide for 11 years. So I can understand how the government thought they could possibly get away with a 20-year cover-up. But I mean, the post office scandal I uncovered, that was covered up for 20 years. 1,000 people got criminal records, many of them went to prison when they were completely innocent. It was a glitch in the computer system that was doing the accounts at the post office that was leading to their convictions wrongly. And everyone knew in Parliament about that 10 years before it was actually exposed. And I went to all the media then and nobody would cover the story, just like when I went with my evidence about the vaccine harms and the excess deaths and what was causing it and the science behind it to all the media in our Parliament, the same media who wouldn't cover the post office scandal. Again, I was completely blanked. and I'm actually banned more or less from mainstream media at all, whereas I used to be on television 3 or 4 times a week.
Wow.
Andrew, you continue to be a huge beacon of hope for people. Thank you for going to Ireland and meeting Dr. Marcus de Bruin on the 10th of June. I know that you gave so many people in Ireland so much hope. And you signed the North Letter. You were one of the first politicians globally to sign the North Letter. What message of hope could you give to the politicians here in Malta, both in government and on the opposition? I believe opposition has a significant role in, asking very important questions. And I'm very interested in what your message would be to the people of Malta, and in particular for the people that are in that very delicate role that they have been voted by the people to stand for the people. I would be very interested in your thoughts in that.
Well, I would say to politicians around the world that the dam is breaking. I mean, I spoke out 3 years ago, but the deluge of evidence of the vaccine harms and the damage they've caused and continue to cause, it is going to emerge, probably from America. I think that Robert Kennedy Jr. and Jay Bhattacharya, who's now the head of the National Institute for Health, that's Anthony Fauci's old job, they will expose the vaccine harms. So it's coming out anyway. You need to get yourself quickly onto the right side of history, and the right side is to admit that the vaccines have caused considerable harm to those who've taken them. And the sooner that we admit we've made a mistake, the sooner we can get on with finding a solution. There are protocols out there that can really help people to recover from the harm done by the spike protein in these mRNA shots. And the time for disclosure is coming. I think it'll be out before the end of October. Politicians need to ensure that they belatedly get on the right side of history, and the right side of history is doing your job, acting in the best interests of the people you're elected to represent, not the commercial interests of multinational, international businesses. As powerful as they are, they're going to be held to account.